I know a lot about her because we were friends until the day she died, which was only about a year ago. She lived to be 95. She's an incredible person, survived the Depression, and made money as a rodeo trick rider, a woman, trick roping and things like that, and then went to South Dakota State and graduated not in home ec or what was considered the norm for women on that day, and then did the unheard of thing of going to law school at USD. And she was only one of two women in her class. She graduates, and there are no jobs for women in the legal profession at the time. But along the way, she learned to be a pilot, and which also there weren't very many women pilots, probably her and Amelia Earhart. And when World War II came along, they would not allow women into combat, and that included combat aircraft. But she was so good that she instructed the male students on how to fly bombers, and she did that through the entire war. And then after the war, she came back to where she was from, little town of Peaver, which is south of Sisseton, had married her husband Cliff, and they set up a farming ranching operation. But after starting to raise a family of 3 daughters, she went back into the law and became a county judge. At that time, the only woman judge in probably the history of South Dakota. And she was a county judge until they abolished that position in 1975 and created our current system. And so Judge Ramynke ran for the position of circuit judge. And I think there was like 7 people running for 4 slots, and she finished first out of the 7, which at that time, for a woman to campaign and convince people that she should be elected, that shows you the force of her personality. Very impressive. I don't have too many heroes in my life, but she's certainly one of them. She never had a chip on her shoulder. She said that it was there, but that she just thought that maybe her philosophy came out of the Depression, that life maybe isn't fair, and that what you do is have to work a little harder to overcome that. But she believed in the essential goodness of people, and that if she gave it her best shot, she would be accepted. And amazingly, she was. I mean, she was the first circuit judge, a female circuit judge in South Dakota. She later became the first presiding circuit judge, who was a woman in South Dakota, and was the first woman to sit on a case with the South Dakota Supreme Court by designation when a permanent justice disqualified themselves. So her whole life was first after first after first. And she never quit learning. She retired from the bench. I think she was 65, and she was still writing her decisions in longhand. And she decided that she wanted to learn how to use a computer. So we have a tribal community college there, and she took a computer class, and she liked it. And so she took another and another, and finally she had completed every computer class they had, and by now she's probably in her 70s, and they tried to hire her as an instructor. Well, first off, I wouldn't be a judge unless she had done an incredibly kind act. She'd intended to stay on the bench 2 more years, but she was pretty convinced that if Governor Janklow was still in office, he would appoint me as her successor. And so she retired actually early so that Governor Janklow would still be in office and I would be appointed her successor. And at the time, since she was the only woman judge in South Dakota, she was asked by a lot of people, don't you think that you ought to be replaced by another woman? Well, that would have excluded me. And she said, no, absolutely not. I should be replaced by the most competent person. Clearly, especially as a trial judge, everything I did on the bench was basically copied from her because she did it so well. Why reinvent the wheel? Actually, later in life, first off, let me back up. Because she was up in northeast South Dakota, she got virtually no attention from the press during her professional career. But after she retired, I mentioned it to Bernie Hunhoff, who publishes the South Dakota magazine, and there's a nice article on her in there. She's in the South Dakota Hall of Fame, and I nominated her for the McCusick Award, which is the highest award I think a lawyer can get in South Dakota. She was awarded that after she retired. So late in life, people finally woke up, and I think in part because by then the legal profession a good percentage of it was then women, but she really led the way. And Justice Judith Meyer Henry, who was our first female permanent justice on the Supreme Court, the day she got sworn in, she made sure Judge Ramynke was there and paid tribute to Judge Ramynke, because she said, Justice Meyer Henry said, but for Judge Ramynke, I wouldn't be here today.